This isn't your average cake. No brown patches, no boring buttermilk. I swapped it out for unsweetened yogurt for extra moisture. I even added a secret dash of coffee to make the cocoa flavor pop. Stay tuned because this red velvet butter cake is about to raise the standard. And once you see the crumb, you'll never look back. Mix the red velvet that's flawless on the outside and secretly upgraded on the inside. No brown patches here, just smooth, vibrant crumb, tangy yogurt instead of buttermilk, and a little coffee kick to make your taste buds dance. Hey cake lovers, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I am Fifi. You know we don't do boring cakes here, only showstoppers. If you love drooling over recipes like this red velvet butter cake, then smash that like button and subscribe. Hitting the like button helps other bakers like you to find my YouTube channel. So yeah, let's bake. So first in a bowl, I'm going to be adding my unsalted butter. You can also use margarine for this recipe. And if you're using margarine, please omit the salt in the recipe because margarine already contains salt. But if you're using unsalted butter, please by all means add salt to your recipe. And as you know, if you are a baker already, you should know that your salt is not just your salt serves as preservative, and it also enhances the flavors you have already built in your cake recipe. So adding salt to your recipe when you're using unsalted butter is actually very important. So next I'm going to be going in with my sugar. After I have softened my butter, I'm going to be adding my sugar and I'm going to be creaming it. So this creaming method is actually what puts air into your batter. You need to allow your you need to mix your butter and your sugar until it is light and fluffy, because this is part of what would make your cake rise in the oven. So this step is actually very important. You can also use your stand mixer. You don't necessarily have to use your hand mixer like I'm doing in this video. You can use your stand mixer. So I'm going to mix this until it is light and fluffy before I go in with my other ingredients. So next I'm going to be going in with my vanilla flavor. So please, when you're working with flavor, please always make sure you use very good quality flavor when you're baking. So I went in with my vanilla flavor and then I'm going to be mixing it a little bit, and afterwards I'm going to be adding my eggs. So whenever you're baking, please always endeavor to use room temperature eggs, and also use very fresh eggs and large eggs when you're baking as well. And then don't forget to scrape the sides of your bowl as you mix, so that you'll be able to mix everything all in properly. So I'm going to be measuring my flour next. So I'm going to be sieving my flour. So please, anytime you're working with flour, please always endeavor to sieve your flour, because if you don't sieve your flour, the measure you get when you don't sieve is actually different from when you sieve. So you can even like sieve your flour like 2 or 3 times, it depends, but just always make sure you sieve your flour and then you measure it. So that was exactly what I did in this video. So next I'm going to be adding my cocoa powder. Now red velvet without cocoa powder is just basically you making a red cake. So the cocoa powder is actually very important. Now I've had cases where people complain that, oh, I end up with brown patches with my red velvet cake. Yes, the cocoa powder tends to do that, especially if you use Dutch processed cocoa powder in your red velvet cake. So now what I figured is using natural cocoa powder actually helps to prevent that brown patches. So now don't get yourself confused. What I mean by natural cocoa powder, you see the likes of Ology cocoa powder, it's called natural cocoa powder because it's still in its natural state. Dutch process, on the other hand, has been processed, it has been alkalized. So Dutch processed cocoa powder tends to be darker than natural cocoa powder. So that is why I'm saying that I would advise you switch to natural cocoa powder when you're making your red velvet cake to avoid the brown patches. Also, I used to just 1 teaspoon of cocoa powder in this recipe because a little actually goes a long way. The essence of adding cocoa powder to your red velvet cake is because your red velvet is supposed to have a slight chocolate feel to it. I'm also going to be adding coffee to this recipe. To make your coffee, all you need to do is add half teaspoon of instant coffee to hot water, and you make your coffee like you would normally do, and then you add 1 teaspoon to your recipe. That is all. So what the coffee does is it heightens the cocoa feel, because we're not using a lot of the cocoa powder in the recipe to avoid brown patches. So the coffee is supposed to enhance the cocoa feel in your recipe. So now also another switch in this recipe is I'm using unsweetened yogurt as opposed to buttermilk. So now what this unsweetened yogurt does is it enhances the flavor of this red velvet cake. It makes it very, very moist. It makes it extremely moist. And then also I added my food coloring to my unsweetened yogurt, and in this video I have used acabado, and I used just 1 tablespoon because acabado is very, very intense. So that is why I have reduced it to 1 tablespoon as opposed to 2 tablespoons of food coloring that this recipe actually requires. So if you are using another brand that is not acabado, please by all means use 2 tablespoons of red food coloring. So back to my butter mix. I am adding 2 eggs to my butter mix. So as I said earlier, please always make sure you use room temperature eggs, and then also use large eggs and very fresh eggs. So I'm going to be adding my eggs one after the other before I go back to my unsweetened yogurt, and I'm going to add my coffee to it. And as I mentioned earlier, to make your coffee, all you need is half teaspoon of dry instant coffee to hot water, the way you'd normally make your coffee, and then you add 1 tablespoon to your coffee mix. And I mentioned earlier that the essence of adding the coffee is to enhance the cocoa powder, like to make it pop in your recipe. So that is it. So next I'm going to be alternating my dry ingredients with my wet ingredients. I'm going to be adding my dry ingredients in 3 additions, and my wet ingredient, which is my unsweetened yogurt, in 2 additions. Now when it gets to this point, please endeavor to try not to mix to overmix your batter, because you're trying not to build the gluten, that's a protein in your flour. So please reduce the speed of your mixer, and so that you don't end up with a dry and hard cake. So aside using the best brands and all of that, and using the right equipment, your mixing method actually matters when you're mixing your cake batter, for you to get the right texture, to get the right taste and all of that in your cake. So I already added a little bit of my flour to my batter. I'm going to be adding a little bit of my unsweetened yogurt. So as I said earlier, I'm going to be adding my dry ingredients in 3 additions and my wet ingredients in 2 additions. Now remember, when I was measuring my flour, I have not added baking powder. This recipe does not have baking powder in it. However, it has baking soda. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you're working with margarine, please omit the salt in the recipe, because margarine already contains salt. So I already added my salt to my flour mixture. I added my cocoa powder and my salt. I did not add any leavening agents to it yet, but we're still going to be adding our baking soda alongside our vinegar at the end of this video. So now I'm done adding my flour mix and also my unsweetened yogurt. So in another bowl, I'm going to be adding my baking soda and my vinegar. So now for the brand of vinegar, I use distilled malt vinegar. The vinegar you use is actually very important for your red velvet cake. I don't use all those, those regular vinegars you see. I don't use that for my red velvet. I use the distilled malt vinegar. So all you're just going to do, you're trying to you mix your baking soda and your vinegar, and then you add it to your mixture and just mix it up together. Try not to over mix, as I said, but you should just always make sure that you mix your baking soda in properly, so you don't tend to have patches of baking soda everywhere. So now this reaction of the baking soda and the vinegar in your red velvet cake is actually what gives it that velvety texture. Recipes that have vinegar, add even like just ordinary vinegar in the recipe, not even with the baking soda, they tend to be lighter than other kinds of cakes, so it gives your cake this velvety texture. So that's the essence of what we just did in this video. So I'm going to be pouring my butter into 4 pans, because I actually used this butter for my cake slices. I always prefer to use my butter based recipe for my cake slices, because of course when you make cakes with butter, it has a better flavor than your oil based cakes. That's not to say oil based cakes are not good as well, but because I work with whipped cream, so I try not to do butter-based cake recipes for my whipped cream cake, because I'll have to freeze them. And when you put butter-based cakes in the freezer, they don't tend to come out back to their moist stage. Even if it will still get back to being moist, it will still melt in your mouth and all of that, but not as fast as oil-based cakes. So that is why I use oil-based cakes for my whipped cream cakes, because I freeze them. But when it comes to my cake slices, I actually use my butter-based recipe. So I divided the butter into 4 pans. You can use 2 pans instead of 4 pans like I did in this video. So the cake is out of the oven. You can see how it looks. It's the red is popping. We don't have any form of brown patches on the side, and we still have our cocoa powder inside the recipe. We did not omit the cocoa powder. All we did was we reduced it, and as I had advised earlier in this video, you can switch to natural cocoa powder instead of using Dutch processed cocoa powder. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button please, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.